Maya Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished mopping the marble floor of the luxury hospital's private wing. At 19, she had been working as a cleaner for 8 months, taking the night shift so she could attend community college during the day. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished surface as she moved her cart down the hallway. Past rooms that cost more per night than she made in a month, the hospital served the wealthy elite of the city, and Maya had learned to become invisible. Rich patients and their families rarely noticed the cleaning staff, which suited her just fine. She preferred the quiet of the night shift anyway, when most visitors had gone home and she could work in peace. Tonight was different, though. As she approached room 1247, she could hear shouting coming from inside. Maya paused, her hand gripping the handle of her mop. She had strict instructions never to enter patient rooms when family or visitors were present. But the voice sounded young and angry, not like the usual calm conversations she occasionally overheard. "Get out! All of you, just get out." The voice was male, probably in his 20s and filled with rage. "I don't want your pity visits anymore." Maya heard the sound of something being thrown, followed by the crash of breaking glass. A moment later, the door burst open, and 3 well-dressed people hurried out. An older woman in an expensive coat was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while 2 men in business suits flanked her protectively. "He's impossible," one of the men muttered. "The doctors say his condition is stable, but his attitude is getting worse every day." "Richard was never easy, even before the accident," the woman replied, her voice shaking. "But this anger, I don't know how to reach him anymore." The 3 of them walked past Maya without a glance, their expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor as they headed toward the elevators. Maya waited until they were gone before carefully approaching the room. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see broken glass scattered across the floor inside. She knocked gently. "Excuse me? I'm Maya from housekeeping. I heard something break. Are you hurt?" "Go away," came the bitter response. "I don't need anyone cleaning up after me." Maya bit her lip. The broken glass could be dangerous, especially for someone who couldn't move around easily. She had seen the patient's chart on her first week. Richard Blackstone, 26 years old, paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident 6 months ago. He was the heir to Blackstone Industries, worth millions of dollars, but none of that money could fix his broken spine. "I just want to clean up the glass," Maya said softly. "You could get hurt if you try to reach for something and cut yourself." There was silence for a long moment. Then, grudgingly, "Fine, but make it quick." Maya pushed her cart into the room and immediately saw the damage. A crystal vase lay shattered near the window, water and expensive white roses scattered across the floor. The room was luxurious, more like a hotel suite than a hospital room, with a private bathroom, sitting area, and even a small kitchenette. Richard Blackstone sat in his wheelchair near the bed, his dark hair disheveled and his expensive pajamas wrinkled. He was handsome in the way that money often made people handsome: good dental care, clear skin, and the kind of confidence that came from never wanting for anything. But his dark eyes were hollow, filled with an anger that seemed to consume him from the inside. "Don't look at me like that," he snapped when he saw Maya's expression. "I don't need your pity either." Maya began carefully picking up the larger pieces of glass, placing them in her trash bag. "I'm not pitying you," she said quietly. "I'm just doing my job, right? Your job?" Richard's voice was full of sarcasm. "Let me guess, you're working your way through school, trying to make something of yourself, and you see me as some tragic figure to feel sorry for." Maya continued cleaning without responding. She had learned early in life that sometimes it was better to stay quiet when people were angry. Growing up in foster care had taught her that lesson well. "I said something to you," Richard pressed. "The least you can do is answer." Maya looked up at him as she swept the smaller glass pieces into her dustpan. "You didn't ask me a question. You told me what you thought I was thinking." Richard blinked, apparently surprised by her directness. Most people either cowered when he was angry or tried to pacify him with false cheer. Maya was doing neither. "So what are you thinking, then?" he asked, his tone slightly less hostile. Maya considered her words carefully. I'm thinking that expensive vases make a lot more mess than cheap ones when you throw them. Despite himself, Richard's lips twitched slightly. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was the closest thing to one Maya had seen from him. That was my stepmother's favorite vase. She brought it to brighten up the room. Did it work? Maya asked, continuing to clean. Obviously not. Maya finished cleaning up the glass and moved to mop up the water. The roses were beautiful, probably costing more than she made in a week. Without thinking, she picked up one that wasn't too damaged and placed it on the knitstand. Why did you save that one? Richard asked, watching her movements. Maya shrugged. It seemed wrong to throw away something so beautiful just because the vase broke. Something in Richard's expression shifted slightly. Most people would say I'm broken too. Should I be thrown away? The question hung in the air between them. Maya looked directly at him, her dark eyes serious. A broken vase is still a vase. A broken person is still a person. Neither one stops being what they are just because they're damaged. Richard stared at her for a long moment. There was something different about this cleaning girl. She didn't speak to him with the careful, measured tones that his family and friends used, as if he might shatter like glass if they said the wrong thing. She didn't treat him like he was made of china, but she didn't treat him like he was less than human either. What's your name? He asked. Maya-chan. Well, Maya-chan, you can go now. Thanks for cleaning up my tantrum. Maya nodded and began pushing her cart toward the door. But as she reached the threshold, she paused and turned back. Mr. Blackstone? I know it's not my place to say this, but those people who were here earlier, they look like they cared about you. Maybe they don't know how to show it the right way, but caring about someone isn't the same as pitying them. Before Richard could respond, Maya left the room. Quietly closing the door behind her. Richard sat in the darkness for a long time after she left, thinking about her words. Most people who visited him fell into two categories: those who acted like nothing had changed and tried to drag him back into his old life, and those who spoke to him in hushed, reverent tones as if he were dying instead of disabled. Maya had done neither. She had treated him like a person having a bad day, nothing more and nothing less. Over the next few weeks, Maya found herself assigned to clean Richard's wing more often. She wasn't sure if it was coincidence or if someone had requested her specifically, but she didn't mind. Unlike many of the other patients and their families, Richard never treated her like she was invisible. He always acknowledged her when she cleaned his room, sometimes with just a nod. Other times, with a few words of conversation, she learned that he had been an athlete before his accident, competing in triathlons and rock climbing. His room was filled with trophies and photos of him conquering mountains and crossing finish lines. Now those same photos seemed to mock him, reminders of everything he could no longer do. Do you ever think about taking those down? Maya asked one night as she dusted the shelf where his trophies stood. Every day, Richard admitted. But my family keeps telling me I need to focus on what I can still do, not what I've lost. They think the photos are motivational. What do you think? Richard was quiet for a moment. I think they're torture. Maya nodded and continued dusting. My foster mom used to keep pictures of her biological daughter all over the house. The daughter who died in a car accident when she was 5. She said it helped her remember the good times, but I always wondered if it just made it harder to accept what was real. You were in foster care? From when I was 7 until I aged out at 18. My parents died in a fire and I didn't have any other family. Maya's voice was matter-of-fact. As if she were discussing the weather, Richard found himself looking at her differently. He had assumed she came from poverty, but he hadn't considered that she might have experienced real loss. Everyone who visited him acted like his accident was the worst thing that could happen to a person, but Maya had lost her parents and been shuffled through the foster system. Yet she didn't carry the bitter anger that consumed him daily. How do you do it? He asked suddenly. Do what? Stay so normal after everything that happened to you. Maya paused in her cleaning and looked at him thoughtfully. I guess because being angry all the time takes more energy than I have. I need that energy for other things. Like what? Like school. Like work. Like figuring out how to make a life for myself. She resumed dusting, her movements efficient and practiced. Besides, being angry at what happened doesn't change what happened. It just makes everything else harder. Richard wanted to argue with her, to point out that his situation was different, that his anger was justified. But something about the calm certainty in her voice made him hesitate. Maya had every reason to be bitter about life, yet she moved through the world with a coup. Maya stared at Richard in horror, her heart racing. She had come into this room to offer comfort, and somehow she had triggered what seemed like a complete breakdown. The man before her looked wild, almost manic, clutching her mother's locket while talking about giving away millions of dollars. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "That's insane, is it?" Richard's eyes were bright with something that might have been excitement or madness. "You just gave me a lecture about how money can't buy the things that really matter." "Well, let's test that theory." Maya took a step toward him, her hand extended. "Mr. Blackstone, please. Just give me back the locket and let's forget this conversation happened. You're upset about the anniversary of your accident and you're not thinking clearly." "I've never been thinking more clearly in my life," Richard said, wheeling over to the phone beside his bed. "Do you know what I've been doing for the past 6 months? Lying here, feeling sorry for myself, while an entire company falls apart without proper leadership. My stepmother and her sons circle like vultures, waiting for me to die so they can inherit everything. Meanwhile, I've been so busy being angry that I've forgotten what actually matters." He picked up the phone with one hand, still clutching Maya's locket with the other. "I'm calling my lawyer. Right now." "It's 2 a.m, Maya protested. "He won't answer." "He'll answer," Richard said grimly, beginning to dial. "He bills me $800 an hour. For that kind of money, he answers when I call." Maya watched in growing panic as Richard spoke into the phone. Within minutes, he was connected to someone named Harrison, his voice becoming businesslike and focused in a way she had never heard before. "Harrison, it's Richard." "Yes, I know what time it is. I need you to draw up a new will immediately." "No, I haven't been drinking. I want everything, the company, the personal assets, all of it, to go to charity." "No, not to my family." Maya couldn't listen anymore. She quietly gathered her cleaning supplies and left the room, her mind reeling. What had she done? In trying to help someone, had she somehow made everything worse? The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Maya mechanically cleaned rooms and emptied trash cans, but her thoughts kept returning to Richard's wild laughter and his threat to give away his entire fortune. She told herself it was just the rambling of someone having an emotional breakdown, that he would come to his senses by morning. Rich people didn't just give away billions of dollars because of a conversation with the cleaning staff. When Maya returned to work 2 days later, she deliberately avoided Richard's wing of the hospital. She asked her supervisor to assign her to the pediatric floor instead, claiming she needed a change of pace. But her supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, gave her a strange look. "Actually, Maya, I got a specific request for you to continue on the private wing." "Very specific." The request came with a significant donation to the hospital's children's fund. Maya felt her stomach drop. "I'd really prefer to work somewhere else." "I'm sorry, honey, but when someone makes that kind of donation, we honor their requests. Besides, you've never had any problems on that floor before. Has someone been giving you trouble?" Maya shook her head reluctantly and took her usual cart to the elevator. When she reached the private wing, she noticed several well-dressed people coming and going from Richard's room. Lawyers, by the look of them, carrying briefcases and folders full of documents. Maya's heart sank. He had actually gone through with it. She managed to avoid his room for most of her shift, but as she was finishing up, Richard's door opened and a distinguished older man in an expensive suit emerged. He spotted Maya immediately and approached her. "Excuse me, are you Maya-chan?" Maya nodded warily. "I'm Harrison Walsh, Mr. Blackstone's attorney. He's asked me to give you this." Harrison handed her an elegant envelope. With her name written on it in Richard's handwriting, Maya stared at the envelope as if it might explode. "What is it?" "I honestly don't know," Harrison replied. "But I will say that in 30 years of practicing law, I've never had a client make such Dramatic changes to their estate planning based on a conversation with a hospital employee. He paused, studying her with curious eyes. You must be quite remarkable. After Harrison left, Maya stood in the hallway for a long time, holding the envelope. Finally, she opened it and read the single sheet of paper inside. Maya, you were right. Money can't buy the things that really matter. So I've decided to find out what can. The locket is beautiful, by the way. I can see why you treasured it. If you're willing, I'd like to talk with you. Not as a patient and a cleaning person, but as two people who understand loss. Room 1247. Whenever you're ready. R. Maya read the note 3 times before folding it carefully and putting it back in the envelope. She looked down the hallway toward Richard's room, then at her cleaning cart, then back at the room. Finally, she made a decision. She knocked softly on his door. Come in. Richard was sitting by the window again, but this time the room was lit with warm lamplight. He had changed out of his hospital pajamas into regular clothes, jeans, and a simple sweater that made him look more like a normal person and less like a patient. Maya's locket hung from a chain around his neck. You actually did it, Maya said without preamble. You changed your will? I did. That's the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard of. What were you thinking? Richard smiled slightly. It was the first genuine smile she had seen from him, different from his usual bitter smirks. I was thinking that you were right. About carrying things differently instead of letting them go. Maya sat down in the chair beside his wheelchair, the same position they had been in when she gave him the locket. I don't understand. For 6 months, I've been carrying my anger like a weight, dragging it around with me everywhere I go. But that's not the only thing I've been carrying. Richard touched the locket gently. I've been carrying my father's expectations, my family's plans for me, the pressure to be who I was before. I never asked myself what I actually wanted. And what do you want? I want to do something that matters. Something more than just making rich people richer. Richard leaned forward slightly. Do you know what Blackstone Industries actually does? Maya shook her head. We buy up properties in low-income neighborhoods, gentrify them, and sell them to wealthy developers. We've displaced thousands of families over the years, also we could turn a profit. Richard's voice was quiet but intense. I used to justify it by saying we were improving neighborhoods, creating jobs. But the truth is, we were just making poor people move somewhere else so rich people could have nicer places to live. Maya was quiet for a moment. And now? Now, I want to use that money to actually help people instead of displacing them. Build affordable housing. Fund education programs. Create jobs that pay living wages. Richard looked at her directly. I want to do the kind of work that would make someone like you proud to know me. Someone like me? Someone who understands what it means to lose everything and have to rebuild from nothing. Someone who works multiple jobs to put herself through school and still has enough compassion to comfort a stranger. Richard's voice grew softer. Someone who would give away her most precious possession to help someone remember they're not broken. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. You really meant what you said? About the will? Every word. My lawyer spent all day yesterday drawing up the paperwork. When I die, every penny goes to a foundation that will be dedicated to helping people who need it most. Richard paused. The only thing I kept was enough money to live comfortably and a fund to finish my rehabilitation. What did your family say? Richard's smile became sardonic again. Let's just say they're not happy. My stepmother has already called 3 times today, demanding I reconsider. She seems to think you're some kind of gold digger who manipulated me into this decision. Maya felt a flush of anger. I never asked you for anything. I tried to give you something and you laughed at me. I wasn't laughing at you, Richard said quietly. I was laughing at myself. Here you were, offering me this incredible gift, not the locket, but the reminder that love and kindness still exist in the world, and all I could think about was how much money it was worth. I realized in that moment just how far I had fallen from the person I used to be. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You could have just said thank you. I could have. But then I might not have realized what I needed to do. Richard reached up and touched the locket again. This little piece of silver has already changed my life more than all the money in my trust fund ever did. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Maya spoke up. What happens now? Now I get serious about my physical therapy. I learn to navigate the world from a wheelchair. I figure out how to run a foundation and actually help people instead of just making money off their misery. Richard looked at her hopefully. And if you're willing, I'd like to have your help. My help? Maya, you understand poverty in a way I never could. You know what it's like to work multiple jobs just to survive? To go to school while cleaning up after rich people who don't even see you. You know what kind of help actually makes a difference in people's lives? Maya shook her head. I'm just a cleaning person trying to get through community college. I don't know anything about running foundations or 5 years later, Maya stood in the lobby of the Blackstone Community Center, watching as families streamed through the doors for the grand opening celebration. The building had once been a luxury hotel that Richard's company had planned to demolish for a high-end shopping complex. Instead, it had been transformed into a comprehensive community resource center, complete with affordable childcare, job training programs, a health clinic, and educational services. Maya hardly recognized herself in the reflection of the lobby's windows. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, the kind she never could have afforded during her cleaning days, and her hair was styled professionally. But the biggest change wasn't in her appearance. It was in her confidence, the way she carried herself as someone who belonged in rooms filled with important people making important decisions. The mayor's here, Richard said, wheeling up beside her. He looked different too, though not in the way most people expected. The anger that had once consumed him was completely gone, replaced by a focused energy that seemed to draw people to him. He had traded his expensive suits for more casual clothes, and his face had the healthy glow of someone who spent time outdoors rather than confined to a hospital room. And the governor's people are setting up for her speech, he continued. Channel 7 wants to interview us in about 20 minutes. Maya nodded. But her attention was focused on a little girl across the lobby who was tugging on her mother's hand, trying to pull her toward the children's area. The mother looked exhausted, probably working multiple jobs just like Maya had years ago, trying to juggle everything while raising a child alone. Maya? Richard touched her arm gently. You okay? Just thinking about how different things could have been, she said softly. For them. For me. For all of us. The past 5 years had been a whirlwind of change for both of them. Maya had graduated summa cum laude from the State University with degrees in business and social work, while simultaneously helping Richard restructure his entire approach to wealth and philanthropy. What had started as an impulsive decision to change, his will had evolved into something far more comprehensive and revolutionary. The Blackstone Foundation had grown into one of the most innovative charitable organizations in the country, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of simply writing checks to existing charities, Maya and Richard had developed a model of direct community investment that treated poor neighborhoods not as problems to be solved, but as communities full of untapped potential. Remember our first project? Richard asked, following her gaze to the families filling the lobby. Maya smiled. How could she forget? It had been a disaster, at least in the beginning. Fresh out of college and armed with good intentions, Maya had convinced Richard to fund a job training program in one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. They had rented space, hired instructors, and waited for people to show up. Almost no one had come. We were so naive, Maya said, shaking her head, thinking we could just announce a program and people would trust us. They had spent weeks trying to figure out what went wrong. Until Maya suggested they actually go into the neighborhood and ask people what they needed instead of assuming they knew. That simple shift in approach had changed everything. The job training program had been redesigned based on input from community members. Instead of generic skills training, it focused on starting small businesses that could serve local needs. Instead of meeting in a rented space that felt institutional, Classes were held in the community center, in people's homes, in the local church basement. Most importantly, instead of being run by outsiders, the program was gradually turned over to community members who understood both the challenges and the strengths of their own neighborhood. "Mrs. Garcia should be here somewhere," Maya said, scanning the crowd. She wanted to thank you personally. Carmen Garcia had been one of the first participants in their revised program. A single mother of 3 who had been cleaning offices at night while her children stayed with neighbors, Carmen had used the foundation's microloan program to start a catering business. 5 years later, she employed 15 people and had expanded into 3 locations, but Carmen's success story was just one of hundreds. The lobby around them was filled with people whose lives had been transformed not by charity, but by opportunity. People who had started businesses, finished their educations, bought homes, and lifted their families out of poverty. "There she is," Richard said. Pointing toward the registration table, Carmen Garcia looked radiant in a colorful dress, her graying hair swept up in an elegant style. She was directing a team of volunteers with the easy authority of someone accustomed to running her own business. When she spotted Maya and Richard, her face lit up with a brilliant smile. "Maya!" "Richard!" Carmen rushed over and embraced them both warmly. "Can you believe this day? Can you believe what we've built together?" "What you've built," Maya corrected gently. "We just provided some initial support." "No, Mia," Carmen said firmly. "You provided something much more important than money. You provided belief. You believed in us when we didn't even believe in ourselves." Carmen's words echoed something Maya had heard countless times over the years. The foundation's success hadn't come from its financial resources, significant though they were. It had come from its approach, treating people as partners rather than recipients, investing in community-driven solutions rather than imposing outside fixes. "Carmen, this place exists because you and people like you convinced us to change how we thought about everything," Richard said. "We came in thinking we knew how to help people. You taught us how to listen instead." As if summoned by their conversation, a young man appeared at Carmen's elbow. Maya recognized him immediately, David Chun, no relation despite the shared last name, who had been 15 and heading toward trouble when Carmen first brought him to one of the Foundation's youth programs. "Miss Maya." "Mr. Richard," David said formally, though his eyes were shining with excitement. "I wanted you to know I got accepted. Full scholarship to the State University engineering program." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. David's transformation had been one of the most dramatic they had witnessed. From a teenager who was failing school and running with a dangerous crowd, he had become a straight-A student and a leader among his peers. "David, that's incredible," Maya said, pulling him into a hug. "Your mom must be so proud." "She's crying," David laughed. "Happy crying, but still crying. She keeps saying she can't believe her son is going to be an engineer." "What kind of engineer?" Richard asked. "Civil engineering with a focus on sustainable community development," David said proudly. "I want to come back here and help design the kind of buildings and infrastructure that actually serve people like us." As David headed off to find his mother, Maya felt the familiar sense of awe that had grown stronger over the years. Every life changed, every dream achieved. Every family lifted out of poverty. They all traced back to that night in the hospital, when she had impulsively offered her mother's locket to an angry, broken man. 5 minutes until the ceremony starts, Richard's assistant, Jennifer, appeared at their side with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset. Jennifer was another Foundation success story, a former teen mother who had worked her way through college with the Foundation's support and was now completing her master's degree in nonprofit management. "Ready for your speech?" Jennifer asked Maya. Maya touched the simple silver chain at her throat. She wore her mother's locket again now. Richard had returned it to her on the first anniversary of their partnership, saying that while he would always treasure the reminder it had given him, the locket belonged with her. But he had kept the lesson it represented, and that had proven to be worth more than any piece of jewelry. "As ready as I'll ever be," Maya replied. The ceremony was held in the center's main hall. a soaring space with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the room with natural light. The crowd was a mix of community members, foundation supporters, city officials, and media representatives. Maya spotted faces she recognized, program participants, volunteers, staff members, and the dedicated group of community leaders who had helped shape every initiative. As Maya approached the podium, she looked out over the assembled crowd and felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just the opening of another building. It was the culmination of 5 years of learning, growing, and discovering what was possible when people with resources partnered with people with vision. 5 years ago, Maya began, her voice clear and strong. I was working as a night cleaner at City General Hospital. I was 19 years old, putting myself through community college, and living in a studio apartment that was smaller than the bathroom in some of the hospital rooms I cleaned. She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the audience. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something important. There is nothing special about me. Nothing that makes me different from any other young person in this city who is working multiple jobs, struggling to pay rent and dreaming of a better future. Maya saw Carmen in the crowd, nodding encouragingly, and David sitting beside his mother, both of them beaming with pride. The only difference between my story and the stories of thousands of other young,